Unspoken Issues.
We're all ready right here on the Unspoken Issues podcast. And we are going to be continuing the Carnage. We are heading straight into the Carnage Cosmic. Now, that's not how I've never known it to be called that. I've always known it as Cosmic Carnage. That's kind of how I always knew. And then I get to reading these issues, and lo and behold, I learned something. It's actually titled The Carnage Cosmic. Of course, I'm not alone. Right here on the Unspoken Issues podcast, we got Dean Compton from the Unspoken Decade. Dean Compton, you ready to talk some more Carnage tonight? We're going to get cosmic, buddy.
Yeah, I am ready, and I noticed that too, and I guess I should have known because it's like the power cosmic, so I think that's what they're playing on with the Silver Serpent. It does sound more dignified, which Carnage does not deserve any dignity, but, he's doing what he can with that cosmic awareness, that cosmic power. But yeah, I'm definitely ready. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad I suggested it. It was a romp and a half, if you will.
This is finishing up, I guess, the Carnage trilogy, I guess is what we'll call it here for the Unspoken Issues podcast. I guarantee you Carnage is going to be reappearing at some point. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's like, we were talking off, in our chat earlier today, because, we got a lot of technology here. So we have a group chat. I don't know, just watch out. Just fire.
Nobody else has this technology.
Emojis, gifts. But it's like, I can't believe we didn't do Maximum Carnage. And I just feel like Maximum Carnage gets covered a lot. There's a lot of stuff, but like there's some other really good Carnage stuff that happened around it. And honestly, this is probably my favorite Carnage story of all time. It really is just a lot of fun from start to finish. And I'm sure Darry will have different opinions. He's got stronger opinions about the old, Spider-Man section of the Marvel Universe. But for me, this was, pun intended, pure Carnage.
Oh, look at it,
ladies
ladies and gentlemen.
I did it.
He mentioned Darry. Darry's sitting right over there. Darry, I want to give you an opportunity to just say Maximum Carnage was a thing at one point. It was a huge thing. I did it on my show, and I swear to goodness, it took me a year to get through it because of so many parts and how much was involved. But give me your thoughts on Maximum Carnage before we jump into the Carnage Cosmic.
I love Maximum Carnage. It was one of the first crossovers I remember buying when I started reading comics. But you guys are absolutely right. It's less fun to cover that because everyone knows of it, even if they've only played the video game. So I feel like everyone's got that iconography, but I'm sure I can count on one hand the number of people who have read Carnage Cosmic. So this was good because this gives us more to talk about that isn't just repeating what other people have said.
Say Maximum Carnage lasted 4 months. Like, you know what I mean? Or 3 months, because it starts in Spider-Man Unlimited #1, ends in Spider-Man Unlimited #2, quarterly book. So like 3 months. That's a lot. Like Jesse said, it spends a year. It guest stars everyone except the Punisher. For some reason, the Punisher can't make it to this. It's right up his alley. But yeah, Carnage Cosmic, 2 issues and a what if, baby.
That's what I was thinking when I started doing the reading for this, and I was like, oh crap, it's only really 2 issues here of the main story, and then we get an alternate side of what could be, which is my absolute favorite take on some of these stories, is getting that what if treatment, and I like it. So that's what we're covering tonight. We're covering Amazing Spider-Man 430 and 431. These dropped in, looks like, cover dated January of 98, according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics. That puts it about the end part of 1997. So our creative team on here, we have written by Tom DeFalco, might have heard of that name, penciled by Joe Bennett, inked by Bud LaRosa, lettered by Richard Starkings, and colored by Bob Sharon. And I believe that is the same creative team for both of the Amazing Spider-Man issues. And of course, we'll talk about the what if here in a few. I'll drop that creative team once we get to it.
You mentioned it was a trilogy before, and if you listen to all 3 of the episodes we did, Carnage, the introductory story, the Spider Carnage with Ben Reilly the Clone, and now this one, you actually do kind of get an arc for the character of Carnage, not because he has all that much agency, but you kind of see how he becomes an escalating threat, which is really interesting because he starts as this like Venom knockoff, this Venom spinoff, very literally. And then he evolves to get to the point where it's like, oh, but he's going to be a threat to these other characters, where here he literally is a world-ending menace, the level of which Spider-Man doesn't even normally fight. Dude. So I really appreciated rereading all these close together as opposed to when they came out back in the day. So I think it does tell a story if we have new listeners and they want to go back and get the other 2.
I think he really hit it there. Like when Carnage starts, it's like he's Bugs Bunny, the Joker. And like he's just doing all these outlandish things. As the character actually does develop. The Venom Carnage relationship, we don't see it here, but it develops in different spots. But the storyline wise, I would almost compare it to our wrestling fans to like The Undertaker and Kane. That when Kane first starts, everything Kane does has to somehow center around The Undertaker. Everything is they're brothers. Undertaker, Kane killed their family. Oh my God, actually it was Undertaker. Blah blah blah. Good stuff. WWF 1997. But the point is as time goes on, Kane becomes his own thing. As time goes on, you don't need the Undertaker to spur a Kane story. And I feel like as we've done our trilogy, we've seen that. You can now have a great Carnage story without Venom being in it at all. Another thing that I would say is that, these books have become very collectible. This is a time when Marvel was not printing a bunch of books. Sales aren't great at this time. I wasn't able to buy comics at this time regularly because there was no comic book store within 150 miles of me. But the way people say it, and Darry probably bought these off the rack, is there was also a feeling in the Marvel Universe that like, I don't know. Like you look at the covers, things seem kind of muddy and dreary to an extent. Like it looks bad for whatever reason. Like literally, when I look at the books from this era, they're being more cheaply produced than they were like 3 or 4 years earlier, and there's just a lack of fun. This is a lot of fun. This like really captures that early Marvel universe where like, I don't think I ever thought that like Carnage could possess the Silver Surfer. It's like when Magneto fought Thor in the issue of Journey into Mystery, or when Loki showed up in Strange Tales and did some of Doctor Strange. It was just really expanding this character into a greater part of the universe. The only other thing I'll say is like, I'm not a big Tom DeFalco guy. I think he usually writes well, like fine, but like not excitingly. Like, it will fill in all the gaps and there's nothing that will be wrong with it. He's really good at craft, but sometimes I feel like his stories lack excitement. This had a lot of excitement. I really appreciate it. Might be my favorite thing that Tom DeFalco's ever written, which is no surprise because I think that of all the things that he's ever worked on, Spider-Man's probably his bread and butter. It's probably the best thing he does. And I feel like this is a really, really great 2-issue. And he writes the What If as well. Dialogue's on point, the action's on point, like everything comes together in a storyline to where Carnage, the Silver Surfer, Spider-Man, and the approximately 36 supporting characters that are in it all really have a good distinct voice, and it all comes together where all the stories are moving. This is the first of the trilogy. This is the one I'm most interested in the subplot. Just reading them. So I really got to give Tom DeFalco credit for really building a really exciting. It's hard to get this much excitement and this much development into 2 issues, and goddamn, he pulled it off.
It's funny too because this is the exact opposite of the way Maximum Carnage was told, which was dragged out for so long so that you could bring everyone in, and there's a lot of padding and there's a lot of fights off to the side with other characters. But this is super
Carry-On's got to get his shit in.
Yeah, exactly. You got to fight Carry-On, you got to fight the doppelganger, but this is super dense. This could have been like an oversized one shot. They get you in, they immediately bring the stakes up. He does, to your point, an excellent job at moving forward all the ongoing plots, because again, this is the period of time where there's still a Spider-Man book coming out every week. These are 430 and 431 of Amazing Spider-Man, so all these things had to keep going. But this is a pretty tightly plotted storyline that you could still pick up the next month and see what was going to happen with Robbie and the others. And the other thing you pointed out, which I actually wanted to mention, was this is a really weird time in Marvel's history because 1998 is after the bankruptcy in 96, so they're clawing their way out, but they're not quite at their like Renaissance period. Joe Quesada.
This is the height of Ike Perlmutter like cost cutting. Yeah. We're getting rid of the water coolers. He wanted to drug test freelance writers, like weird stuff was going on.
Yeah, it's definitely a transition period. For Spider-Man in particular, they had just killed the Clone the previous year, but the following year, in 1999, they would actually do a hard reboot and get rid of all the titles and reduce it down to 2 a month and do a prototype of Ultimate Spider-Man in John Byrne's Chapter 1. Like there was a big reboot coming. So this is kind of like rearranging the chairs on the Titanic to a bit. But the nice thing too is these don't get revisited that often, but this is good. This is a gem. So hopefully people who are like would skip this period of time normally and just pick it up when JMS or Bendis came on. It's like, no, these are good and they reflect the times they came out of in the best way.
You're right too about this. Like, it could have not just been an oversized one shot, but I think it's going to be 2 years after this. DC does like the Emperor Joker storyline where the Joker gets like godlike powers. This could have just been a line-wide crossover. I mean, honestly, which may have made it worse. Like, I'm not going to lie about it. It might have made it a story like, because it really has a lot of impact because, like you're saying, it's so condensed. But this is a big enough event to where when you see in the What If, you're like, boy, this could have really, really went bad for the Marvel Universe. I mean, I don't know any other way I could work in. Wow, I wish the Punisher had been in this. So if it had been a line wide, the Punisher could have done something. I'm just messing about that. But you're right. Like it really feels like a bigger deal than 2 issues, which is all the more testament to how good the 2 issues are. Because it also doesn't feel like you also don't feel ripped off or cheated.
Yeah. I had Emperor Joker written down. It's so funny that you say that, especially the What If, which we'll get to. But yeah, if this had come out a few later, this would have been a huge crossover. If this came out
years earlier.
Yeah, exactly. If this had come out today, Donny Cates would have taken 15 issues to tell this story, and there'd be a 5-issue tie-in with like the X-Men or whoever they were trying to promote. Like this has that potential of, the unhinged serial killer gets the power cosmic. What is he going to do? For the most part, it's going to be shenanigans, but he also might murder Thor. Like, yeah, to your point, if this had come out any other time, it would have been this ridiculous over the top thing, and it might have been able to stand that. But yeah, Emperor Joker is a perfect example where like that maybe should have been 2 issues, and that's what we get here.
Yeah, and like you're saying, now it'd be like a 14-part thing. If it had come out in like 92, it would have been in all the annuals, like Atlantis Attacks or what have you.
Yes, sir.
Or it would have been like the Infinity Gauntlet with individual crossover issues. But this was just a time when Marvel not only didn't really have the money, but like editorially, it's kind of loose. I mean, like they're ending Marvel-lution. They don't really know what's going to happen. This is Marvel Knights hasn't started up, or it's just about to. I guess Marvel Knights is September of 98, August of 98, somewhere around there. So they're just getting that going. So it's not even to the Quesada days. I feel like this is this feels like the kind of thing like the X-Men's Inferno, or when we did Dead Man's Hand, that if some other editors had heard about it, they would have wanted to play, but there wasn't that ability. And again, this is conjecture. So if an editor hears this, like, that's not how it was, let us know. We're free to hear it. But it feels like this is something that could have been bigger, but because of just editorial uncertainty at the moment, it stayed where it was. And that probably, in my opinion, makes it better.
Right. Darry, you mentioned, and I'm glad you brought this up. I mean, people going from our last episode to this one, Peter Parker's back as Spider-Man. Spider-Man, I mean, it never seems to be a dull moment. So these 2 stories are titled Savage Rebirth and The Carnage Cosmic.
That synopsis is coming up, but first let me talk about Amazon Music. If you're looking for a good platform that can fill those musical needs, Amazon Music has you covered. If you head to getamazonmusic.com/W2M network, you can get a free 30-day trial where you can check out over 70 million songs. That's getamazonmusic.com/W2M network for that free 30-day trial.
So like I said, never seems to be a dull moment in Spider-Man's life. As currently, there is $1 million reward on Spidey's head, set by his own employer, the Daily Bugle.
I'm sorry, you say $1 million?
$1 million.
I believe so.
I'll be right back.
This is great because after dragging the Clone Saga out for years and demonizing it, they were finally like, well, how are we going to end this thing? And it's like, well, we got an entire generation of readers who don't know how much of a badass Norman Osborn was. So let's resurrect him for no reason whatsoever. He's going to kill the clone. The clone's going to die. We're going to rename one of the the Todd McFarlane book. We're going to rename it Peter Parker. We're going to double down on our brand. And again, this is 4 or 5 years before the Sam Raimi movie. So we don't have the market penetration we're about to get. But yeah, these books are just, this is classic Spider-Man. It's like my brother clone was killed, my worst enemy came back, and now he's my employer. And because of something that, happened in another book, he put $1 million bounty on his own. So now this is back to the old Silver Age. Spider-Man can't help anyone without them saying, like, you know what, maybe I should turn you in. And again, Spider-Man's got to sit down and say, is this worth it? And it's like, yeah, of course it's worth it. Even if the person you might save is going to try to turn you in, it's like, you can't not do it because you're a crazy person in a full face mask.
All that in college.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Grad school.
Grad school, right?
The guy who was
with his girlfriend, which is all like, I went to college, and if you go to college single and you go to college and you have a girlfriend, it's a lot different. There are different experiences.
He's there with his wife, who was there for some reason, even though last time I checked, she was a world famous model. And she's there. They only get one scene in this issue or this story, but they mention a character, Jill. That is Jill Stacy. That is Gwen Stacy's heretofore unseen cousin, who they brought back because they wanted this thing to feel as much like the Silver Age as possible. So Peter is literally attending ESU with Mary Jane and Ace Stacy, but they're all like our age. Like, there's no reason to be here.
Then there needs to be more like lidocaine patches then. They're out there living it up in college. I'm like, do you have any ibuprofen?
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. So he's trying to avoid being spotted as a Spider-Man. He goes to meet up with MJ, who's quite upset. He's in costume with the price on his head, and of course there's a little bit of drama there. Reassuring her everything is under control, Pete leaves his wife to head to his job at the Daily Bugle. Turns out some employees of the Bugle also aren't happy about the current bounty on Spidey's head, especially Robbie Robertson, who has been thinking of quitting. Now, help me out here. Is he part owner of the Bugle now? How does Norman Osborn factor into the Bugle in this? Tell me.
So Norman, when he came back, he had all his money. He had all his resources. He had whatever nonsense the story called for. And he just wanted to hurt everyone. So I guess the Bugle was not in great shape financially. So he came in as like an angel investor. And, back in the day when Norman was introduced, he was introduced as being a socialite who ran in the same circles as Jameson. So before he was outed as the Green Goblin and all this other nonsense happened, they were quite chummy. So he comes back and he's like, oh, the Goblin was someone else. I was in witness protection in Europe. Don't worry about it. We're all good. I'm going to be cleared of all these charges. How about I give you, the money to tide you over? I just want, a little bit of control in the Daily Bugle because he's the only person who knows Peter Parker, Spider-Man, and Peter Parker works there. So he wants that leverage. So he gives him the money. He takes over, and suddenly the Bugle becomes an unfriendly place. It's really interesting. I always tell people, like, they may not like the way the Clone Saga ended, but this set up all the stories of the next 10 years. This allowed Norman Osborn to be reintroduced into the public. He's just about to be in the movie. He's just about to be in Ultimates. And then the character goes on to be the enemy of the entire Marvel Universe in the Civil War Initiative, Dark Reign era. All that gets set up here because this is a guy, this is when it becomes not the Green Goblin who's the foe, but Norman Osborn, the evil industrialist, Marvel's version of Lex Luthor. Like, he's got all his superpowers as the Goblin, but it's his money and influence that's really wrecking everyone's lives. So that's all set up here. It's actually a really interesting premise. Unfortunately, it doesn't go anywhere.
During this, while this is going on, so obviously, like I said, Robbie's thinking about quitting because he's not digging what Norman's doing. He doesn't dig the fact that there's a bounty on Spidey's head. As this is going on at Ravenscroft, some new administrators, Dean's comments are ringing in my head. This is what the government, why I hate the government. Some new administrators are trying to cut costs. They decide to see some of the expensive security measures keeping Cletus Cassidy and Carnage in their cell. But as soon as power is cut, I don't even know if it's a panel. Carnage escapes and heads to find Spider-Man, and his first stop is the Daily Bugle. Boarding an elevator.
So many people. So many people.
Once he gets there, he boards an elevator. Cletus is pleased to find Robbie's wife, Martha, en route to have lunch with her husband. When the elevator reaches its destination, the doors open to a horrifying scene as a bloody Martha lay on the floor with Carnage rules written in her own blood of the elevator walls, with Cletus gone. Luckily, Carnage only stabbed her arm and did not kill her, but Peter, as a witness to the aftermath, leaps into action, tracking Carnage down into a parking lot. Meanwhile, out in space, the Mir space station is under the threat of some oncoming asteroids. Luckily, the Silver Surfer was in the area using his power cosmic to save the space station and then heads to Earth. Coming upon the battle of Spider-Man and Carnage, Silver Surfer swoops in to assist, but the symbiote recognizes and immediately slides off of Cletus and heads down a sewer drain. Spidey lets Surfer in on what was going on, and Surfer says he has encountered the alien symbiotes before. Chasing the symbiote into the pipes below, the Surfer is caught unaware, and when he emerges to the surface, Spidey is horrified to see the symbiote has merged with the Silver Surfer, becoming the Carnage Cosmic. Realizing he is outmatched, Spider-Man can see that the Silver Surfer is still aware and is fighting for control of his body. Soon, the Surfer heads off to try to detach himself. Spidey, meanwhile, sees an agony-ridden Cletus Cassidy in a fetal position after his partner pretty much just left him and decides to take him to a hospital. But once Spider-Man arrives, cops immediately try to arrest him, cash in on that bounty, baby. So Spidey flees the scene, and is trying to get in touch with the Avengers, but for a little bit of help, but it's a little too early since they have just returned to this universe. This is right after Heroes Reborn. So they haven't reformed yet. He also tries to find X-Man, Nate Gray, and again, more people try to apprehend Spider-Man than listen to him for help. Returning to the hospital to check up on Cletus, he learns that Cletus has advanced stomach cancer that is progressing at a rapid rate. So Cletus Cassidy is definitely on the decline and possibly at death's door here. In space, the Carnage symbiote reflects on how it remembers who the Surfer is when, in the past, the Surfer arrived and called Galactus to devour a planet that they had taken over. Silver Surfer then sees what the symbiote has gleaned in Cassidy's life, the mistreatment and psychosis of an insane man. Finally regaining control, the Silver Surfer looks to reunite the symbiote with Cassidy, but Spider-Man won't have it. No, it's not happening. Can't do this. There's no way. But then Spider-Man comes to his senses. Even though he knows that Cletus is going to die and the cancer is going to kill him, he understands that he would rather have the symbiote on Cletus instead of it being on the Silver Surfer. I would probably choose that too. I'm just saying. When the symbiote finally makes its way back onto Cletus, Carnage arises from his hospital bed. But do you think he's got, does he say thank you? No, he does not. He is not very grateful at all. Looks to go on a murderous rampage immediately. But some quick thinking by the Silver Surfer allows him to encase Cletus in an unbreakable shell of ethereal energy, where he says both can take a very long time to contemplate their previous misdeeds. And that, my friends, is the 2 issues of the Carnage Cosmic. Darry, I'm throwing it to you, buddy. We talked already a good bit about this story. We just made it through Savage Rebirth and the Carnage Cosmic. Give us your thoughts, man. What do you think?
One of my favorite scenes, you mentioned it, but this takes place right after Heroes Reborn. So in 1996, the Onslaught crossover gets rid of all the classic Marvel characters, pretty much except for Spider-Man. They go off, they have their own adventures. Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee are involved. And then this issue picks up right when they come back. And it has the best caption of all time because the very first page of issue 430, before Carnage or the Silver Surfer are even seen, has Spider-Man rejoicing the fact that the Avengers and the Fantastic Four have returned. And he says, I have no idea how this happened, but I'm so excited. And then there is a caption box that is lettered by someone clearly different than everyone else on this page that says Spider-Man actually does know how they came back because he's in this miniseries that hasn't shipped yet, but make sure to check it out this summer, which is the Heroes Return miniseries, which is not worth reading. But I love that because this whole thing was so haphazard that it was like, oh, he's excited they came back. Oh, wait, we decided he was going to be part of the story where they came back. And it's just one of those things where I really appreciated that. The other thing I really liked about this story was the Thunderbolts cameo, and the Thunderbolts are one of my favorite Marvel concepts of all time. And this is set where you don't yet know their true nature, so they get to hang around in the background. And again, it's this idea of like, are we going to help Spider-Man or are we going to turn him in? Because $1 million sounds pretty good. And it's one of those things where it's like, Spidey can't win, but even if he can't win, he's still got 4 to 5 books coming out every month, and he's still Marvel's biggest moneymaker. It's this like cool inversion of the the traditional setup. It's like our underdog, our most unliked character proves to be the most successful. So we're just going to pile more crap on top. And I love that. The other thing that I really enjoy, and you guys were laughing about it during the synopsis, was halfway through this story, you see a bunch of police officers or hospital guards. I'm not 100% sure what they are. They're talking about how Cletus has the advanced cancer and he might not make the night. And one of them is like dunking a donut into a cup of coffee. And it's just like, yeah, that's a damn shame. And then they start talking about whatever's on TV. And it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, all right. No one wants to make light of someone passing away in terrible pain, but like, in canon, this is the worst serial killer has ever existed. So it was it was just kind of funny to see these career cops just being like, yeah, you know, it's terrible. We can't make his pain less. See what's on the other channel. It's just a funny scene.
Right, dude. Well, yeah, you know, some of the small things that I kind of left out of the synopsis, you know, I stuck to the main stake of what we're getting here, that steak dinner. But I mean, we've got a lot of, well, you mentioned the Thunderbolts. That's one thing. MJ and Peter kind of relationship drama that's going on in this. Then we definitely have Robbie Robertson and his wife going through some stuff in this as well. And I felt sorry for Robbie. Like, she's like, all you want to do is just chase the story. You don't have any time for me. And I'm like, oh, come on, Martha. I mean, the guy's trying to provide for you. You know, he's a news guy. Come on. He's going to do his thing. I felt bad for him.
It's very tough to do a story arc for Robbie because Robbie's one of my favorite supporting characters of all time. But he was introduced, first of all, to make the cast a little bit more diverse because he was one of Spider-Man's first black supporting characters, but also to like balance out Jonah, who at times would be like a cartoon Nazi. So like having arcs.
You couldn't believe that he was in the publishing business. You know, you needed somebody within there, but that happens. You get like, think about Rupert Murdoch, a very bombastic in your face guy. Well, you need somebody to be like, well, this has got to be news still. Yeah. Like even the Post has to run some real news, and I'm sure there's Robbie Robertson at the Post who's like, really, guys?
I think there probably was at one point someone at the Post. At this point, I can't believe the Post still gets published. But but you're right.
Once upon a time.
Yeah, the Bugle is the Post, and there's got to be Robbie is the reason that they keep getting published. They don't get buried in lawsuits. But that also makes him a different character to write because it's like every time you want to do something with him, it's like how flawed are you going to make him before Jonah has to be the good guy. So here it's like, okay, we're going to put all the drama on the wife, or like when they did the Tombstone story, it was like, oh, I'm not that person anymore. Robbie has a sketchy past. And it's all these other things, but it always comes back to the same point where it's like, yeah, Robbie's a good guy. I don't buy all this drama. I did like the way they introduced his wife, particularly being the victim, because it gave credence to what she was saying, which was you put yourself into danger. And why is that such a big deal? Well, now I got hurt and all I did was come here to go out and bring you lunch. So I like that because, this story does end with him resigning. And it's not the first time and it won't be the last time. But it was one of those things where it was like, what is the Daily Bugle going to be when the people in charge are Jonah and Norman, who's an even worse Jonah, and the conscience is gone. So again, that sets up a more interesting story that, and I say this a lot, doesn't go anywhere. But
I mean, and let's also like be fair. I see her point of view, like I work in communications, so I work terrible hours. Like, okay, I'm off Wednesdays and Thursdays, shitty days to be off. The last 3 days I worked 1 p.m. to 1 a.m., 1 p.m. to 2 a.m., and 1:30 to 1 a.m. Those are bad hours. She doesn't see him. She loves him. She wants to be around him. And I don't want it to sound like she like nagged him into quitting. He quits because Norman Osborn's a son of a bitch. He quits because Norman Osborn is making this to where like he can't do it in the way he wants to, and he can't be the man and the person he wants to be. It's not just because his wife is like, man, you're kind of throwing yourself into this and forgetting me. It's a bit all of it. So I don't want to throw her under the bus and be like, oh, this, how those ladies are always making men do things they don't want to do. It's not really like that. It's a nuanced situation where, and as somebody, I'm going to be 43 this year. And as you get older, it's weird. As you get older, you come through a lot of crossroads as you grow up, as you go through life. But man, you blow through so many of them. And as you get older, a lot more apparent, a lot more stop signs, a lot more four-way stops, a lot more traffic lights, a lot more weird merge lanes for some reason. But the point is, he's at a crossroad. And there's a lot of reasons for this. It's not just like a crossroad. It's two streets. Sometimes on each side, it could be different names. It's like, here's his wife. Here's what he does at the paper. And here's, who he thinks he is and who he wants to be. And he's got to find a way to reconcile all that. And at the end of these two issues, the only way he can figure out how to do so is to resign. And of course, and I think that's great. mockingly to an extent because I'm sort of an asshole. But my friend once said, he said, Dean, you are the Michael Jordan of being a son of a bitch. Which, I try and be nice, but all I could think of while I was reading this, and it's a good story, I don't want to take away from it, is the melodramatic song Fred Jones Part 2 by Ben Folds, which is about a guy who's retiring from the newspaper after 25 years, and he's really sad. It just reminded me of that because he's like, it's time. And there's the line in the song, it's time. I like the song. I like this subplot. I listened to that song and thought about it. Might have cheapened it a little, might have made it a little too melodramatic. But I really do honestly suggest, though, listen to the song as you read the subplot. It goes together pretty nicely. It is essentially the Amazing Spider-Man equivalent of Pink Floyd and the Wizard of Oz and LSD. You put it together, works very well. This is suggested for mature readers. But I really like that subplot, and I really like the Mary Jane one because, honestly, Peter Parker, you're a fucking idiot. Like, these people want $1 million. Take the train. The one thing that we can say about New York City in like the late 90s is that the train system had gotten a little better. It was a little cleaned up. It was a little less dangerous, that it wasn't like 1986 or what the fuck ever. So, like, take the train, bro. People want to kill you, and the only way they'll know it's you is if you put on these clothes. So don't wear those clothes and you'll be safe. And he's like, I guess Mary Jane would be upset. Why wouldn't she be? Why would she not be? Dude. It's like, my girlfriend will find out that, I drove to work while I was really dizzy and I like threw up on the way. She's like, I'm mad at you for going. I'm like, what's the big deal? Why wouldn't she be upset? I put myself in danger and I made myself feel uncomfortable for no reason. Granted, it's probably a lot cooler to swing across the skyscrapers of Manhattan than throw up on yourself while you're driving. But at the same time, I understand why both of our significant others weren't into this endeavor. We both could have died. That's the thing. Like, why are you putting yourself in danger here, Peter Parker? So, that's another good thing. Although, it's weird that, like, Mary Jane apparently hangs out with, like, the most sitcom-y ladies ever. This lady goes from, like, bitching at her about Peter. Her other friend's like, oh, he's not that bad. Then the one lady goes from, like, complaining, bitching about Peter to, oh, yeah, men like to do it, though, right? Like, she's like, oh, it's just like an episode of like a show that they made to compete with Friends that wasn't Friends. That's how that felt. But I know that sounds bad, but it works, guys. It really was a fun little thing to read. It was almost like a Marvel Betty and Veronica type situation in a way with three people. It honestly works. It feels of its time. It feels 90s, but it was cool. And of course, like, Mary Jane's upset. And also she's trying to eat in the school cafeteria. Bad idea. Yeah. Those were a couple subplots I really liked there. I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but I'm getting off it now.
That's actually how the plot line resolves. Is you said he wear different clothes. That's where we get the characters, the slingers.
The slingers, right?
Yeah. Because another couple of months after this, I think so. If I have my timing right, is someone's just like, well, why don't you just make a different superhero persona? Like there's dozens of them out there. No one's going to notice it. So it's a weird thing. Then you can do whatever you want. When this nonsense is over, you go back, and then each own creative team came up with one, and that's what you had for a couple of months. So it's funny. You're like, why doesn't he do that? And it's like, oh yeah, it's a good idea. They did that. So
but like he also already had two costumes. I'm not saying he had to go back to the black one, but bro, just make another one. Like you already did this. Like he stopped. I don't know what to do. You mean you don't know how to do the thing you've already done?
Guess not.
Well, the real thing is they needed to have 4 costumes. It was they wanted that book to become something. Like they wanted the slingers to be something. It never did really be anything. But that's the thing. You couldn't just put on another costume. Let's get 4 characters. Let's get things going. And you're right. The slingers. That is a really fun way to wrap this $1 million bounty up.
Yeah.
Let's take a couple minutes. Now, this is an audio podcast. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this justice, but I'm going to share my screen with the boys, and we're going to just talk a couple minutes on what we think of Joe Bennett's revelation of Carnage on the Silver Surfer. And I'm going to share this with you guys. I don't know if you can see my screen or not.
Yeah.
Dean, we'll start with you. I mean, there it is, buddy, in all its glory. Yeah. That's the debut of Carnage and Silver Surfer as one.
Well, I mean, first off, I appreciate that even though he's absorbed the Silver Surfer, still really into pointy stuff. Like, in fact, he's made the surfboard pointy, so I like it. Like, we're sticking with the brand.
Yep.
Carnage. It's really weird when it comes to lettering in a comic book. You only really notice if it's really shitty or really good, and this is a situation where it's really good. They have highlighted the words madness, outrage, wrath, chaos, carnage cosmic, desires, emotions. They've really done a good job. I think just as you read it, where you're like, oh wow, now this guy is insane and has the powers of the Silver Surfer and is driving Norinrad himself, the Sentinel of the Spaceways. Insane. So I like it. I think it's a great way to end the first issue. I mean, once upon a time, I think this was really factored in more. I think now that you write more for the trade, people care about this less. But like I was reading an interview with Larry Hama the other day, and he used to talk about how he plotted by the page. That like he wanted the end of every page to make you want to turn the next page. This is a perfect way to end a comic book. And I mean, it's probably a smidge cliche, but cliches are cliches for a reason. Formulas are formulas for a reason, because they fucking work. And they didn't try and gussy this up. They give you a slightly scared, but still brave looking Spider-Man looking at what is arguably the biggest threat to hit the Earth since, the birth of Victor Von Doom or the arrival of Galactus I think it's a great way to end it. I don't know much about Joe Bennett. To be honest, I knew he drew Spider-Man around this time. This is really good. You can't ask for more power out of it. You can't ask for more danger, and you can't ask for a better panel to make you be like, when is 431 going to be in my hand?
That's what's been fun about this, is that we've talked about like different artists' take on Carnage and what he looks like. And here we have another example of a different take. I mean, it's not completely different, but obviously we're trying to get across the fact that, hey, this is Carnage and the Silver Surfer all one. This is the Carnage Cosmic. It looks like Joe definitely leans toward a more fluid, not bleeding, but more fluid, like it's just kind of dripping in some aspects off the Silver Surfer. But Darry, what do you think, man? What do you think of her? It does, and I think, I agree.
And I like it.
What do you think, Darry?
Yeah, I really like this design. I think it's fun to watch the Carnage symbiote evolve, because it's been on Cletus, who's not with it all the time. So it becomes this very fluid thing. It's not Venom. It's not controlled. And Eddie Brock is all about his control, right? He's got to know where things are going. But when it goes on to the Surfer, the Surfer is a character who's like this fallen angel, this star that's been trapped on Earth. So it's funny to see Carnage wrap around that, but keep the same basic shape. But yeah, those, the points, the spikes, the blood red, it's like, it's Carnage, but at the same time, it's not the Surfer. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly. It's this idea. It's almost like Alex Ross once described Bizarro as, from a distance, he should look like Superman. And that's the terrifying thing, is you think you're about to be saved, but you're not, because this dark, evil version is going to show up. You don't know what he's going to do. It's the same thing here. From a distance, you might think, this is the Surfer. This is going to save me. And then as he gets closer and you see the points and the glint off everything, you realize, oh no, that's the most evil supervillain wrapped around the most powerful superhero. We're all going to die, and it's going to be really, really, really bad. So I love this design. I think it's perfect. I think it's a great way to introduce him in this story, because again, it's simple. It's like you know what you're getting from A and B, and they squished it together and they went for something very iconic. And I think that, the board is one of Kirby's most classic designs, and Carnage is like, yeah, sure, flying surfboard, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Just make it blood red, and we're going with it. I'm going to wreck everything I can, but I'm staying on the surfboard. It's like, it just makes sense to me.
Okay, Dean, you've jumped in here. You talked about some of the subplots. I mean, give us your thoughts on the main parts of the book here. How things were wrapped up in this story. What are your final thoughts here on the 2 issues?
Well, I have still a ton of thoughts, amazingly, for 2 issues. First off, kudos to Carnage for getting rid of the rich guy who parked in the handicapped spot, and all of a sudden, man of the people Carnage. I honestly, he's like, hey man, you parked a handicap. He's like, I don't give a fuck. And he's like, dude, I was telling you so you didn't get a ticket. For whatever reason, I believe him. For whatever reason, I feel like Carnage is trying to do somebody a solid. Like, you just put a nickel in. Like, he lived in New York. This is just what you do. Hey, you can't park there. You're trying to do somebody a solid. So But then, yeah, he's like, you fat cats think you can do whatever you want. No war but the class war for Cletus Cassidy. I appreciate that. And then Spider-Man gets in on it, too. He's like, you parked in a handicap spot? Yeah, you sort of deserve this.
Who's the real villain here?
I think I haven't read as much Carnage stuff as some people have, maybe. But it's very interesting. We read the last Web of Carnage, where Carnage, we get Spider Carnage, and he leaves, the symbiote leaves Cletus for Ben Reilly. And then here jumps off so to get the Silver Surfer. Man, Cletus Cassidy, what a symbiote cuck. There's nobody that this symbiote would not leave him for, and he's gonna die. Like both times, he's just gonna die. He can just not care. Just and I don't, it's not that I'm like the cops when it comes to Cletus Cassidy. It's like, oh, too bad this guy who's murdered 300 people is gonna die horrifically. It's so funny how like it's so different, the relationship between, like you said, Venom and Eddie Brock, where like they care about each other. The Eddie Brock, the Venom symbiote, would not have just like left him like immediately for the Surfer. He just told Eddie, he's like, hey, we got to kill the Surfer. I hate that guy. He killed a bunch of innocents. And Eddie'd be like, yeah, let's kill him. This guy's like, fuck him. I need more power and I need to do it now. Fuck you, Cletus. So I don't know. I did not realize that Carnage was just such a, like second choice, for the symbiote.
I really like that because
I do too.
Again, I go back to like Carnage is a kid, right? Like we don't know how long Venom was on Battleworld. We don't know how long he was in that machine. He could be a senior citizen. He could be middle-aged for symbiotes. When he gets on Spider-Man, he's happy to be there. When he gets on Eddie, he's happy to be there. When he gets on Flash later, he's happy to be there. And he's incredibly powerful. But Carnage is just like this little bit. No one planned on it. He's a kid. He's a toddler. He's just wandering around. So I kind of love the fact that he'd just jump around and be like, oh, I'm on this guy. And that was cool. But this guy seems to be able to fly into space. I remember space, or at least my parents do. I'm going to see what happens here. And then like DeFalco does a really good job of expanding on that mythology. Like we all take this for granted now with like the character of Null and how popular the symbiotes are. But, like for a long time, this was the closest thing we got to world building. Like the idea that Surfer led Galactus not to their homeworld, but a world the symbiotes had taken over. And my favorite line of dialogue in the entire thing is when Surfer sees the symbiote, and again, the Surfer, the herald of Galactus, the most powerful Marvel superhero, he's like, what is that thing? How have you not killed it already? And to see the Surfer being terrified of this pile of red goop is great, because you see the fact that like this thing was brought to Earth by accident. No one had any idea what it was. And Surfer is like, no, that thing, if you let it reproduce and feed like it wants to, it's going to take over the entire world. And none of you are even going to know it. You're going to be one giant hive mind that my old boss would have eaten with no problem. You're not going to have facilities necessary to outthink him next time he shows up. So I love
the only planet that he's ever been like, boy, I'm glad I let Galactus eat that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, dude.
Good thing we got here. Look at these fucks.
It's it's funny, and I would only go into this with you guys and all of our listeners. But if you actually read the original Kirby and Lee Coming of Galactus, there actually is a line of dialogue from the Watcher that says, "Why, Galactus, are you eating Earth? This is the first time you've ever eaten a planet of intelligent life." And it's never referenced anywhere else. Galactus obviously eats planets full of intelligent life and dozens of other stories. But the first time we see the character, Stan the Man does his best to try to say why. Why are you doing this now? And I kind of like the idea that if you consider that as canon, it's almost the Silver Surfer saying like, once you've been possessed by that symbiote, you're not alive anymore. You have an infection. You have fungi and spores and everything else, and your old life isn't going to be worth it. And you almost see that with Cletus, because the second the thing comes off, suddenly he's got advanced stomach cancer that no one seemed to know that, even though he's
going to die in 5 minutes.
Seconds. And it's not just him. This is picked up later on by other people. I think Eddie Brock's had like cancer like 6 or 7 different times. Like this is a thing. Like normal humans are not meant to have these symbiotes. So again, I like credit to DeFalco. It's like you did a lot of work in 2 issues, and we're still using that mythology 20 years later. So great. Thank you.
I like this scene too where Norrin Rad is like thinking about it, and he's trying to essentially like I don't know, Zen Buddhist his way out of this one. But power to him, because he's right. Like every time, most people, they fight, they burn themselves out, they just die. He's like, listen, I just got to show it's a little fella toddler who don't know nothing. I got to show him some compassion. But like, I really like the scene where it's like Galactus was there in space and they were all like that, like all over the asteroids and stuff. And great to give them the Crow style generational memory where like everybody remembers this and everybody's looking for it. I also like how the symbiote like got the Silver Surfer, was like one of the oldest tricks in the book. Just lured him into the sewer where he couldn't go around anything and just dropped on him. Ha ha, got you. All in all, like I said, the whole thing, there's really not a bad part of any of it. So I highly recommend it. It's well drawn. It's well written. A couple really great splash pages of just classic Spider-Man. Just if you like him swinging between buildings, I think you get like 3 of those that look good where he's thinking about every problem he's ever had. Like, it's like Darry said, great world building, great characterization, great action. If you're looking for more in a 2-issue story from 1998, I don't know, get a Vertigo comic. and I'm not mad about that. I like lots of Vertigo comics, but like, I don't mean to, or Fantagraphics. I'm not against these things. I don't mean to sound as demeaning, but you can't. I would be hard pressed to get like more out of a single, like one single title, 2 issues, superhero 1998. I think this is probably the best you could do.
I love that he tries compassion on him, because it's just one of those things where it's like Spider-Man is completely out of his element, right? And he has compassion. He doesn't want to see anyone die. But the Surfer's different. The Surfer has condemned entire worlds, entire system. Galactus has taken out entire potentialities of life, and Surfer is responsible for that, and he knows that, and he's coming to terms with it. That's his entire arc over the decades. And even here, confronting this thing that he is afraid of, he knows how dangerous it can be. He's like, we can't kill it. Life is too precious. It's just too precious, but
a minute ago he wanted to kill it. Like, he's like, kill that thing, and then he's like, listen.
But once he's on it, once they realize how similar they are, you actually see the Surfer grow, because once it's on him and he's like, oh man, I can do all these amazing things, and this thing caught me. This thing's on me, just like all those living beings that were destroyed that I said probably, were at the end of their lives. So I like that.
I think Cletus factors into that. It's like Silver Surfer, like maybe he would have just killed the symbiote, but now a guy is going to die, and I don't care how bad that guy is. Yeah. Like, that guy is a person, and he does not deserve to die. I think that probably played into it some, but it is funny to watch that 180. Kill that. Yeah. No, wait, don't.
It's great. I thought it was a great character moment for the Surfer, because again, when characters like that show up in a Spider-Man book, it's just kind of like, okay, you can end 99% of the stories that Spider-Man finds himself in. How are you going to interestingly interact? And I thought he pulled it off. DeFalco did a really good job here, just saying, how do I take the Silver Surfer of all people and show him a bit of this? It's like, well, I'm going to wrap this awful blood red thing around him and see what he would do. And the answer is like, oh, wait, I have to find an inroad with you, or else we're going to destroy this planet I love. And I thought that was a great way of evolving the character arc.
The ethereal energy prison. So does anybody know how that unravels at any point later on down the road?
Years later, the next time we'd see Carnage in a material way, I think is in the first arc of New Avengers, where Bendis,
when the Sentry rips him in half.
Yeah, when the Sentry rips him in half, and Bendis has said on numerous interviews he didn't read any of the books before he came on. When he writes Avengers Disassembled, the very first thing he does is break up the team and bring in all these other characters, so that he doesn't have to read the other 499 issues. Like, I get that, but it's like with Carnage, he just has Carnage show up in the Raft, the big prison at the time, the Rikers Island annex, and then the Sentry, the Superman analog, rips the Joker analog in half, and then that goes to be on its own thing. And Carnage is still published today. But yeah, to answer your question, I don't think there's ever a story where someone says, oh wow, Carnage is still a statue, we should maybe fix that. I don't think that's ever done.
They probably put it in an airport. They probably put it at Newark.
Newark, definitely Newark. Not LaGuardia.
That's probably where
it's in Newark. That's in Newark. Canon accepted. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because on the one hand, the Silver Surfer's like, can't kill. I got to kill him. Can't kill him. Now he's like, don't kill him, but leave him in a state that is arguably worse than death.
Dude, he's not doing so hot. I'm sure, standing in one spot for eternity. There's going to be an issue. If he's not crazy now, All right,
Right,
let's just see how this works.
Silver Surfer is against the death penalty, but really into solitary confinement.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Life without parole, solitary confinement. That's fine. We're just gonna
Right.
nothing bad's gonna happen from that.
He's like, listen, I saw your Supermax in Colorado, and I'm thinking about building one in space. But speaking of the Surfer, though, one of the more interesting things that they touch on here that I wish they had gotten into a little more when he was fighting is that this is a period of time where, like, I think J.M. DeMatteis is writing Silver Surfer. He's on Earth more. And he's actually going out with Alicia Richards, the Thing's ex, and the Thing's coming back, and he mentions, I hope this doesn't make things weird.
Right.
Bro, everything is gonna make things weird. Like, how could it not? How could you have the power of cosmic and have no, I don't know, cosmic awareness like Captain Marvel, like, you know, something like, how could you, I hope this doesn't make things weird. You know, it's gonna, but I also wish that, like, when he was fighting Carnage, he had, like, thought about Alicia a little bit. I think that, you know, if we're gonna nitpick it, you know, I mean, because it's hard to find anything wrong with these two issues, that's probably the nitpickiest thing I can find is, man, he probably should have mentioned her when he was, I don't know, fighting for his life.
Yeah, the only nitpick I have, and I didn't have it at the time, but reading it now, it's like DeFalco clearly didn't envision people reading these on their own, because these are written to be just issues 430 and 431. Like, all these subplots continue on, all these characters that you don't necessarily know if you haven't read some of the other more recent issues show up, have something to do, and then move on with something else. It's like, I feel like today a lot of that would be scaled back, so a new reader would potentially pick it up and just focus on, you know, the title fight. But reading these, it's like, oh yeah, that's just how things were at the time. It's like picking up the quote-unquote Dark Phoenix saga. You got to read 5 other plots before Jean Grey dies on the moon. It's like he did not envision you just picking up those 3 issues. Right. And it's just funny to see how far we've come in the ensuing years.
Whatever happens to that kid who wants to take Peter out for the to the next game? Hold on, and let me just say this: I don't want this to sound like Married with Children, like a Al Bundy or something. But that kid is like, "Hey, do you want to go to the Knicks game tonight?" And Peter's like, "Yeah." He doesn't ask his wife. He doesn't talk to his girlfriend. I have a girlfriend of 10 years. Y'all are married. This isn't a bad thing, but nobody can make that decision without consulting their significant other, and they shouldn't. Honestly, did y'all have plans? What were we gonna do? Most of the time, it's fine. Like, if I'm like, "Hey, Emily, my friend's gonna, we're gonna go to the arcade. Is that cool?" You know, you're not really asking permission. You just want to make sure you're not fucking anything up that you already had going on.
Right.
Or if she had a bad day, I had a bad day. Can you come up? Sure, whatever. That's arguably the most unrealistic thing that happens in a book where a symbiote takes over the Sentinel of the Spaceways, who used to be the Herald of Galactus, a guy who eats planets. Okay, like, this is arguably the most unreal. Sure, only if I can spend my money on the most expensive part, the beer and food, bro. That you cannot do that, Peter. That is a bad husband. You cannot do that.
I love that character, Billy Walters. I love him so much. He's introduced to, like, flesh out the Daily Bugle for this period of time. He's, as far as I remember, he's killed violently and he's never mentioned again. He's
That
like,
sucks, man.
Oh, wow.
He seemed like I like him. He honestly, like, I've been in broadcasting for like 20 years. He reminded me of a young me in broadcasting. Like, you're in there, you're trying to make friends with the people who've been there before. You want to prove that you know what you're doing, but you're also unsure yourself. I like the guy. That sucks. That sucks. Bring him back.
I'm a fan as well. I hope they bring him back. And what are they? Oh, they're starting the new Amazing Spider-Man next month. So who knows? Well, maybe Billy Walters can return.
Yeah, maybe he'll have, like, laser zappers too. Has anybody in the Marvel or DC universe ever been dead and just come back, but like they were a normal guy and just going to do normal guy things? Like, I don't think that happens. Like, anybody who was normal and died comes back and they're like, now I have the power of Beelzebub and I'm going to do this. Like, nobody's ever like, you know what? I'm going back to the office. I died. Yep. I got brought back by the Spectre, and now I'm going to just, go back to my life. That doesn't happen.
I think there was an Astro City story about that where they were like, someone gets brought back, and it's like, oh, were you a member of the Honor Guard? It's like, oh no, I'm just Bob. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Well, enjoy your second chance at life. Normally when this happens, it's a super cosmic event, but you slipped through. So, Godspeed, Bob.
That's awesome. Well, let's get into what if number 108 here, The Greatest Sacrifice. This drops very shortly after these 2 issues. Looks like it hit the shelves April of 1998. as mentioned before, yes, our writer stays the same. We got Tom DeFalco writing this, Sergio Cariello. I'm sure I'm butchering that, and I apologize. Pencils. Inked
Sorry,
by
Sergio.
Yeah, we are.
Can we call you Serge?
Inked by Keith Champagne, lettered by Chris Eliopoulos, and colored by Kevin Tinsley. So we'll go ahead and we'll hop into this what if here. If you're not familiar with the concept of a what if comic, it takes a Marvel event and it tells an alternate take on it. So that's kind of what we're getting here. We're going to revisit the moment that Spider-Man reached out in that previous story to the Avengers, and he didn't get anybody to pick up. Well, I think Jarvis picked up, but he's like, nobody's home.
Jarvis also very condescending when he did so. Like, he's like, how do I even know this is Spider-Man? Bro, he has the number that you answer. Who has this number? Do you answer every call that comes into the mansion? That's weird, Jarvis.
The Avengers take the initiative here, and they show up. The Avengers at this time are Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, Vision, Firestar, and Justice. And they team up with Spider-Man and battle the Carnage Cosmic. Each member tries to get the upper hand, unable to defeat him. And the more time goes by, the more dangerous Carnage Cosmic gets. When Carnage Cosmic lets loose, it's weird calling him that, lets loose a massive cosmic blast, the Avengers lie unconscious and defeated. Sometime later in the Avengers mansion, the team is recovering while Spidey gives them the lowdown on just what led to the symbiote taking over Silver Surfer. Now Carnage Cosmic is going around the world wreaking havoc, which we didn't get any of this in these first two issues. He's twisting the Eiffel Tower into knots. He's balancing a pyramid on top of what I think is the Capitol building. He's doing some really insane stuff around the world. Spidey comes to the conclusion that the alien is permanently bonding with the Silver Surfer, and they're going to have a really tough time subduing him. However, there is no more time to discuss a plan as Carnage Cosmic makes his way back to New York. One of the main weapons that may work against the threat is Firestar's microwave beams, but she's kind of reticent to use them in fear of killing the Silver Surfer. Becoming increasingly aggravated after battling Iron Man and Cap, Carnage Cosmic fires a humongous blast that levels parts of the city. I mean, it's massive. Enraged, Thor battles with Carnage Cosmic, and when the evil appears to be defeated, he gets Thor to pause for a bit of bargaining and then hits him with a hard blast, knocking him out. Awaiting on top of the hospital that houses Cletus Cassidy, Carnage Cosmic finds Spidey, Justice, and Firestar. Firestar finally unloads her powers on the Carnage Cosmic, and as the symbiote begins to melt off of him, Silver Surfer begs for her not to stop and to vaporize every last bit of him and the alien. Able to regain some control, Silver Surfer flies into space. So he must have just had enough of these microwave beams. He flies into space, detonating himself and the Carnage symbiote, leaving the heroes in awe at his sacrifice. And hence ends the greatest sacrifice. So, Dean, I'm starting with you, buddy. Here's our what if.
You know, it's a really good what if. I am predisposed to enjoying what ifs.
Same.
But
Same.
So it's easy to get me. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun. It basically allows you to delve into the horror of Carnage having it, which part of the horror is just like he just does stupid stuff, like twisting the Eiffel Tower around and all that. Like he's playing jokes. But like at any time, a bunch of people could die, just like because he takes out what appears to be like a dozen blocks. That's, I don't know how many, 100,000 people, 200,000 people. I don't know how that would work. It would depend on the area in New York City. I really think it was funny how even during this crisis, they're like, okay, we're all getting together. There's no Avengers yet. But somebody's really quick, I think it was Iron Man, to be like, Justice and Firestar aren't actually Avengers yet, guys. You know, you're like, what the fuck does that matter right now? Can we please stop the omnipotent, psycho from like destroying the world? Or is it more important that Justice's membership card have the right the right little like stamp on it or whatever? I thought it was funny too. They're like, you guys stay back. Firestar's the one who could fight him the best, but have him stay back. And then like Tony Stark needs all of these, like, he's like, oh, Spider-Man said this sonic frequency would work. You know, he's immune to flame. Ain't you got like a laser, a flamethrower in that suit?
Something.
You gotta have like shoot him with some like napalm rockets, bro. Like you're a weapons guy. Like, why don't you have more weapons for this? And also I thought the same thing about Thor. It's like, why doesn't Thor just zap him with lightning? That burns. I'm pretty sure things burn because of lightning. And yours is magical lightning. So it would like, I don't know, burn double. Like when you get get poisoned on Final Fantasy, where like you're taking somebody hits you take damage every turn still, but you're still hitting them. So I felt like that would work. I don't know, but it's a what if. So nobody makes good decisions for the most part, except the Silver Surfer, who nobly sacrifices himself, which seems to happen in like a lot of what ifs. Like that seems to be a big what if trope. Is the Silver Surfer's like, I'll go die, I guess.
Yeah, somebody's got to die.
Somebody's got to die. And honestly, as far as what ifs go, as long as you weren't like a citizen of the world, fairly low body count. All the Avengers make it. Spider-Man makes it. Only the Silver Surfer and the symbiote die, except for, those people. Who cares about them? Am I right? those people never come back from the dead. So what does it matter? I like how Captain America apparently jumped in the sewer to avoid being killed. Good call, Cap. I love Captain America, and I think at one point they were like, what's his superpower? I was like, really, if you read it, his superpower is that he never loses a fight. Like, regardless of what it takes for him to win this fight, he somehow wins. Like, he would put his shield in Galactus's eye, and he would, I don't know, trip and fall over the Sears Tower and then drown in Lake Michigan. That's what would happen, if he fought him. Like, this would just happen. And here we see Cap again. You're like, oh, he cheated death. Of course he did. And he's so brave because he has Olympic level strength and, dexterity and all that, and a great shield and a really, really bright outlook about the possibilities of the American future. None of which are weak Carnage, but yet he is in there fighting, just doing his best to deal with him. How do you not respect Cap? Thor's a big dummy in this. Just the biggest dummy you've ever seen. I love Thor, but he just seems like he seems very slow. Like, why don't you take Carnage into space and rip him in half? That's what you should do, like the Sentry would do later. But I mean, to be honest, I'll cut Thor some slack. They think they can still save the Surfer. It's a shame that they can't. But all in all, it's just a lot of fun. I think it's drawn very well. I think the facial expressions are drawn there's a look of desperation of the Firestar, Justice, and Spider-Man as they're hanging back versus the look of desperation as Cap, Iron Man, and Thor on the front lines. I think there's a really good distinction, as far as the way the facial depictions were rendered. And I also think it's funny. They're like, hey, Firestar, you the one who absolutely nails the weakness. You stay behind. Cap, get out here. Cap, you bring your shield. Bring that positive outlook of the American future. But it's a great time. Darry, I'm sure you agree.
Yeah, I love this issue. I missed it when it came out originally, so I was very excited to read this untold tale of the Carnage Cosmic. A couple of things that jumped out at me were, I love the fact that in the 2-issue story, the Avengers don't show up and everyone makes it to the end, because without the quote unquote big guns, they got to find a different way. But here, when the Avengers do show up, they actually make things worse and the Surfer ends up dying. And that strikes me as just a very Marvel story. Like, when all the superheroes who don't even have their own book right now show up, it escalates things to the point where Carnage is suddenly like, oh, well, if the big guys are going to, come out and do this to me, it's time for me to, call everyone a maroon and then go around and start committing acts of genocide throughout major metropolitan areas. So I thought that was great. I like that the damage came about because of the escalation that the main character would have thought was a good thing. My favorite part about this entire issue is Firestar. Firestar is one of those classic Spider-Man characters. She was introduced in Spider-Man and the Amazing Friends. She showed up, she bopped around the Marvel Universe, and eventually she became an Avenger. And one of our previous episodes, we did the Squadron Supreme, where she actually saved the day by outwitting the villain Champion.
Champion. Great morning ratings.
Yeah. And I thought it was great that, again, this young woman with these incredible powers, who, by the way, in the Avengers book, it finds out they are giving her cancer and they gotta work their way around it. So again,
aren't they also making her infertile?
Oh, was that a thing? Okay.
I can't remember. Right. I could be thinking of something else. I haven't read the Perez Busiek early issues for a while, but I remember it was hurting her. She had to change costumes. And isn't she wearing that costume in this? She wouldn't have had this costume yet, would she?
Yeah, the timing is a little not great, but again, if you know,
because she gets a costume that will help, and this is the costume that will help.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure. I knew she should be in her classic costume at this point.
A lot of things should be going on. I mean, again,
listen, editors want to know prize.
Editors are the hardest working people at these things, and
sure, I'm not the least bit mad. And I don't remember, when did this one come out?
On sale date was April 1st of '98. So,
okay.
Yeah,
so close to the beginning.
One thing,
Was this
okay,
her
can I
second
nip?
new Warriors outfit? I can't remember. They look similar.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'll nitpick on the cover because I don't think at any point do we get the symbiote covering the shield at all in this comic. I know he at one point, I think, gets a hold of Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, but I wanted to see that shield covered and used in some way, but it's not. It's one of those, the cover's a lie, man. The cover
You
got
can blame
me.
Steve Rogers for being too damn good.
Yeah, buddy. So Darry, I mean, they upped the ante here. We got Carnage. It's not just versus Spider-Man now. Obviously, it's a bigger threat. We got to bring in the Avengers, and this is just going to show us how much we're still outmatched by this insanity.
I love that they made a point of Carnage melting the Statue of Liberty, because again, it's one of those like arbitrary things. Like Carnage acts out, whether it's the symbiote being relatively young or Cletus saying, "Oh, you're gonna put that idea on a pedestal. I'm gonna knock it down. I'm gonna pee on everything you love."
Right.
So I really thought that this was a great way of saying, okay, you've had the power of God for at least the next couple of minutes before someone reasserts control, and to just watch him do all these things just felt very honest, because it's like, yeah, okay, you don't have a grand plan. You don't want to take over the world. You don't
Right.
want control. You want the opposite. And I thought that was executed very well. The other thing that I really liked, more so in this issue than the other two, the Carnage Cosmic seemed to reflect Cletus's personality. So it didn't just seem like Carnage was wrapped around the Surfer and it was the Surfer poking his way through. It was more like Carnage, it also reflects the personality of Cletus, and now that's on him. And I like that again, because it says like this suit is picking up everything. It's like a sponge. It's wrapped around this metalhead serial killer. It picked that nonsense up. It wrapped around the Spider clone who was drowning in his own drama. It picked that up. It's on the Surfer who knows what a star feels like. He's picking that up. And I just love the idea that, again, this character is evolving in a way that separates him and makes him unique from Venom. And again, helps to explain why we have a movie of him and the character is still being published and all these other things when dozens of other
collection of his own.
Epic collections. Yes.
I mean, for real though, that's kind of a big deal. I mean, like just to have 25 issues that are like, hey, these are the seminal Carnage issues and they're important enough for us to put together and people want to buy them. I mean, I think that's a pretty big deal for a character, especially for a villain.
That's a good point too.
Captain America's going to get a bunch of them, but there's still not a Doctor Doom epic collection.
Mm-hmm.
Well said. That's an excellent.
Put it on the agenda.
But here's my question about all this trilogy, and I wonder if you two can answer it. It is, when are we going to get, from the very first, Carnage's first appearance, what if the guy from the Metalhead concert with the knife got possessed by Carnage's symbiote? That's the one we need.
Yeah.
Let's kill him. Like, he's arguably the MVP of the trilogy.
I will agree. I will 100% agree. Well, he definitely lives on in our freaking messages. That's for damn sure.
Oh, yeah. One
He's
day.
coming our Mac and me.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh man, that guy wanted to help though. He did. Or were there two characters? One wanted to help. One was like, "That's going too far."
Yeah, one of them was like, "I like the music, but no." And one of them was, "This guy had a knife."
Let's think about this now.
It's a big knife too. It's not like he had like a Swiss Army knife he had to unfold. Like he was like a butcher knife. Like he was going to kill somebody that day, whether it happened at the concert or not. Like this was already on the agenda.
Oh, it's great.
But my point was that, like, for you're right. We saw the character develop to the point where he is economically and creatively and popular enough to get an epic collection, which I think is a really big deal for a villain.
I really enjoyed this issue just because, again, I mean, people think of the Avengers now and it's like, the most valuable media franchise in the world. And it's like, this was not the case in 1998. Like, none of these characters were the marquee characters. Like, that's why Marvel still controlled them. They didn't control Spider-Man. And I love watching this story where all these people are outclassed. And again, things would have ended up better if they hadn't shown up. And this is such a perfect issue. And I'm so happy that I finally got to read it because I really, really appreciate today seeing how far these things have come. And again, Firestar, underrated character. Yeah. I like everything that she's shown up in. I think she's a classic Marvel. Her everything she does, there's always a cost, but she goes on anyway. Everyone's like, hey, you can end this right now. And it's like, yeah, but I don't know if that's the best decision. And she still comes through in the end. So again, if this is just like, if you're listening to this and you're a huge fan of Spider-Man and his Amazing Friends, and you're like, I want more of that, well, pick this up. This got you covered.
Yeah.
As far as the Avengers showing up too, and making things worse, I think some of it's timing. If they had shown up like 10 minutes earlier, they could, because the plan because they show up at the exact moment they're going to put this guy back on Cassidy. So if they were 10 minutes earlier, maybe, you can be like, hey, this is a good plan. And, they just go with it. Like, hey, but, Silver Surfer's going to wrap him in some cosmic tinfoil. It's going to be fine. But since they showed up at that moment, they had to make a choice right then. I think that's the problem would be like, a firefighter. You show up to this situation and sometimes you make the wrong choice because you had to make the choice right then. And that's what they were. They were first responders who had to make a choice. It didn't work out, but I agree with you about Firestar too. It's always fun to see her. I have a Firestar Marvel Legends, one of my favorite characters. I have her on my animation shelf. So because she's in the Amazing Friends get up. So
talking about how late this What If came out, we got 6 months after this, the series is over.
Yeah.
Issue 114 is the final What If, or
I think
final
it's a
What If.
Secret Wars Battle World thing, right?
Yeah, 25 years later. Yep, I was just looking that over. I'm a big fan of the What If series, especially a lot of the earlier issues. And I can remember going into, we have this small store that sold just magazines and comics. It holds a nostalgic value that they carried a lot of different comics, and What If was one of the comics that they carried on the newsstand. And I would go over there, grab one, and I can remember, I think I did pick up, I'm pretty sure it was What If number 1, volume 2, or volume 2, number 1, the Evolutionary
War. What if?
Great one.
Yeah, because I remember the Punisher's in that with the big head, and he's
big
like,
old head,
like killing criminals, but now there was no need for that because they're just like everybody's got to be in it. He had an annual, so like, okay, here you are.
Yep. But yeah, so I can remember picking those up, and it was a fun, neat story. That's why I appreciated What Ifs. And these 2 issues, at least I never heard of them until probably legitimately 10 years ago at the most. Then all of a sudden my buddy's like, have you ever read these? And I'm like, no. He's like, well, they're really blowing up right now. People are really getting interested.
They were not big in their time. They was not. I mean, Spider-Man sold well. And I think Darry can back this up. But like at the time, I think the Marvel's big thing then was the return of the Avengers, as far as like their creative successes, the return of the Avengers and the early Marvel Knight stuff, which was kind of half and half. The Inhumans and Daredevil were great. Black Panther was great. Punisher was Punisher. So I think Darry, like, he was buying more comics then. I went to college in '98, so I was able to go to a local comic book store again. But that's the way I understood it. Spider-Man sold well, but nobody when I went to the store in '98 in like September and got my account set up, nobody was like, "Oh man, make sure you get these Carnage cosmic back issues."
Yeah, buddy.
So I think you're right. I don't remember hearing about this until like at least 2005. What about you, Darry? Did you pick this? You picked this up off the shelf then? Do you remember it being like a creative success? Did people was Wizard talking about this or anything?
No, it was a weird time. I got these on the shelves because I was buying ASM, but this whole period of time, it's like everyone was talking about everything else, right? Like
that's kind of what I felt like.
Yeah, the Heroes Reborn thing was a big deal because it was basically Marvel outsourcing. Like it's the prelude.
Right.
We keep talking about Marvel Knights, but it's very important to remember Marvel Knights was saying take 4 characters or 4 franchises we're not using, and you over at Event Comics, you're going to make them. It was the same thing with Heroes Reborn. It's like you over at Wildstorm and Extreme or whatever Liefeld called his company at that time. You guys are going to make these, and the idea was, well, are we really going to come out of bankruptcy? Like everyone was focusing on all the other stuff, and this kind of seemed like the type of thing where it's like, well, no one's reading this book anyway. We didn't recover from the Clone Saga as quickly as we like. Do whatever you want. Like I said, they're going to relaunch the book next year, so I don't necessarily know that this got everyone up to speed. But yeah, at the time, it was just like, oh, okay, this month we're trying this. And again, you move on. Like no one mentions this the fact that Carnage had the power to destroy the world. No one mentions that after this.
Right, dude. And of course, it's DeFalco. DeFalco, I don't know how the What If structure works in regards to, like, were they just like handing out like, hey guys, What If 108, who's got an idea? And DeFalco's like, well, I got another idea. And he just throws this out there. What do you think?
Well, early on, like it had an editor that I know was very proactive in trying to make things happen. I forget the editor when What If Volume 2 started, but if you go back and look, like Liefeld did some covers, they had some decent talent, and I think it was early on it was easy because they're like the first one you mentioned, what if the Avengers lost the Evolutionary War? As time went on, I think it was harder to find moments that you would do a what if about, and so again, I don't know exactly how it would have worked at this time, but the way it seems is I think they wanted What If, I may have read this somewhere, but don't quote me on it. I think they wanted What If to be a little more in tune with things closer to what was going on. So they felt like it would sell more because, like you said, it's not going to last a lot longer. Here's something that happened recently. It may have been, and maybe Tom DeFalco will hear this and he can answer the question. It may have all been done at the same time. It may have been done just a little bit later. But yeah, I do think at this time they were basically just trying to mine the individual books for what if ideas that were closer in real time to when the what if would come out, rather than like my favorite. But the what if moment for me, I remember it was the first time I went to the comic book store. I only had like $8, which is not as much money as it seemed in the comic book store. There was this what if, and it was like what if number 41, like what if the Avengers had fought Galactus? And it's like Jim Valentino's last Marvel work. Like I think he wrote and penciled it. And I remember just being like, wow, I went home and begged them. I was $1.75 because it's a double-sized issue. And I remember going home and begging Mom for the money, and I had to clean up my room like really good to get it, but I got it. And I remember just thinking how neat it was that like the stories happen, but then more stories could have happened. And we can, since it's a comic book, if you can draw it, it can happen. It's not like It's hard to do. I know they just did a what if cartoon, but that's hard. It takes a lot more to get that on a screen. On the other hand, you can draw this and write it, you can make it happen. So I'll get more in depth on my feelings on that issue there, but like this really brought back those feelings of like an exciting what if that I just really like. I would have cleaned my room for What If 108. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's good.
The only other thing I had in my notes was someone mentioned this before, but at one point Spider-Man goes searching for Nate Gray, X-Man.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Right.
That was another thing that I had forgotten about, but again, I don't know whose idea this was, but in the late 90s, after the Clone Saga, someone had the bright idea that Spider-Man and X-Man needed to be friends. And there were numerous issues of Spider-Man where he and Nate Gray are just hanging out and chilling. And like he's his new like Daredevil or the Human Torch. Like, hey, I've got a problem and this guy's outclassing me. I'm going to go find the X-Man. And to my knowledge, they had no overlap. Like there's no reason they should have been friends. It was like the most obvious marketing ploy. I don't remember any of the stories. I tried reading them after I caught up on this, but yeah, that random reference of like, I'm going to see if the X-Man is available. Right. And I had to remember like at the time, that would have been something that they were pushing, but obviously the character's not even drawn. You just have a random person mention it and then a crowd attacks him. But that really brought me back of like, yeah, that was a thing they were trying to make happen.
Oh man, that was on my pull list. I was getting X-Man.
No, my thing on it was it was neat to see. I was unaware of their friendship, but I think it makes sense to an extent. Like Peter Parker would see a young person struggling with power and responsibility, and of course he would relate, and they would, like each other. But what kind of like it seems like he's surrounded by a very like what's a bohemian hippie cult, right, and like, dude, but when Spider-Man comes. What?
No idea where that came from. I said I liked reading X-Men, and I don't remember any of that. I don't know what's going on there. It's
like Spider-Man comes down, and they're like, aren't you a bad guy? What bohemian hippie cult is like into the mainstream media, especially what like the Post analog? Like, oh, the newspapers told us you were bad. Cult people don't do that, man. Like they just, I don't understand. I mean, but again, it's funny. Listen, they can't have X-Man come solve the problem because X-Man is powerful enough to solve the problem. So I get why it couldn't be found. It was a way to keep, remind you, like, apparently Darry said they were pals. If they're pals at that time and you don't do this, people are asking a different question. Now we're reading it 24 years later. If you don't, but why did he just go get X-Men? So Tom DeFalco had to address it. It seems funnier now than like probably if you were reading the book at the time. But I really liked it. I thought it was neat, and I was hoping I would pay to see X-Men versus Carnage Cosmic. Absolutely, that's a fight I would watch. I would also watch our guy Cable fight Cosmic Carnage, and I would watch Cable fight X-Man. So, I'm an easy guy to get on. I mean, as long as there's a fight. The only other thing I think I wanted to point out was at the top of maybe page 2 or 3 of 431. There's a guy on like the very right who looks like Stan Lee, and I thought that was fun. Like he's got like a temple and he's got glasses and he actually gets a line, so I'm pretty sure it is Stan Lee. Because he's I can't remember what it is, but basically they're like, get out of here, and he's like, whoa. So thought it was fun. It's always fun, like when we saw. It's funny to bookend it. In the first one, I saw the guy who looked like Paul Evans, and this time I saw the guy who looked like Stan Lee, and I feel like that brings everything together.
Yeah,
I agree.
Symmetry. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
it's like when the Undertaker Tombstone came 3 times in 1998 to win. It's the same.
All right. Well, let's go ahead. We'll get things wrapped up here. Like I said, it's been a fun journey, guys. We've done some awesome stuff here, covered a lot of ground, learned a lot about Cletus Cassidy, learned a lot about Carnage, Spider-Man, both versions of Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and of course, we're talking also Ben Reilly. So yeah, we've had a lot of fun. So with that being said, let's go ahead. We'll get into plugs.
This would be a good time to plug a sponsor of the W2M network, and that is Grammarly. For you, the listeners of Unspoken Issues, Grammarly is offering a free download of the Grammarly software. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2M network. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2M network to download Grammarly for free.
Let's hear it, Dean. What do you got for the Unspoken Decade?
Oh, the Unspoken Decade. You can find us at theunspoken.com. We're very active on Facebook, thanks to Symbi Fan's great work. He has listened to these episodes. He's a big Carnage fan. He doesn't want to talk on a podcast at this time. He does some great work, though, but he really likes what we heard so far. I hope he likes this one, too. So shout out to Symbi Fan there. He does great work at the Facebook, great work on the website, writing articles. I do the Twitter. So that means like, hey man, 4 tweets a week, look for them. They're there. You can see them there at Unspoken Decade. And just come by, hang out. We just got 5,000 members of our community on Facebook. So that's kind of a big deal.
Wow.
There's a lot of people out there who really like the stuff we're doing, and we're going to keep doing it at those spots. And as I always say, one day I'm going to write something again. Maybe that'll be what Darry plugs. I'll write it and I'll tell him to plug it first. But no, that's where we're at. That's what you'll find us.
I could tell you myself and Chris Armstrong got together on Source Material, the comics podcast that I do. Anyway, we got together and talked about Morbius, 2013 Morbius, the Living Vampire. And as I told some guys on Twitter, I'll give you 4 things, and then I'll just tell you, listen to the podcast, and we'll connect the dots. Morbius, a hoodie, the rose, and the ultimate nullifier. That's right. All 4 of those things pop up in our main part of the 9-issue series from 2013. It's a wild one. So Chris Armstrong and I, let's just say we weren't totally impressed. But hey, you can go check it out and hear us kind of gripe about that. And hey, I will also plug, we just had it recently on the Metal Hammer of Doom. I do a metal podcast with my buddy Mark Radlich and Robert Cooper. We talked about Macho Man Randy Savage's 2003 Be a Man album. Be a Man, Hulk. But other than that, yeah, hey, it's the Unspoken Issues podcast. Look forward to, we're going to be dropping some more stuff here. I don't know what the next project is. I'm sure we'll talk about that off air, but it's going to be happening soon. So for Dean Compton, for Darry Waite, I am Jesse Starcher. We'll be talking to you soon. Let the carnage continue. Have a good one. Bye-bye.